Java Java Amabulat Diranawa, and welcome to Ita See the World. And today we have our special guest, our family, our whānau from Waikato University in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And this year they visit Taiwan for 6 weeks immersive Indigenous exchange program. And today they are going to share with us what they saw and learned from this journey. And before we start the interview, they are going to share with us their traditional Maoli dance and chants. Let's listen to their voice. So, kia ora everybody, welcome to Taiwan.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. And thank you for joining us today, and so happy to have you here. And so first, could you say hi to our audience first and introduce what is your role and what is your major in the Waikato University?
Kia ora koutou, ko Nathan Rahui tōku ingoa, huri tēnei no Ngāti Whātua no Ngāpuhi hoki. So kia ora everybody, my name is Nathan. I am a project lead for Māori business at the University of Waikato in the Deputy Vice Chancellor Māori Office. Woo!
Yay! Okay, next.
Kia ora koutou, ko Mahirangi tōku ingoa, huri tēnei no Ngāti Tamatira, Ngāti Tikorehe hoki. I am in my 4th and final year of a Bachelor of Management Studies with Honours at Te Whare Wānanga o Waikato.
Kia ora koutou, ko Liv Mellon tōku ingoa, huri tēnei no te maunga tito e ao Taranaki ko Ngāti Māori Waranui te iwi. I am in my 3rd and final year of a Bachelor of Arts majoring in Māori and Indigenous Studies at the University of Waikato.
Kia ora e karema, mai make tū ki Tongariro, ko te arawa te waka, ko te arawa te iwi, mai ngā kuria whārei ki Tihirau, ko mātātua te waka, ko te whānau apanui te iwi. My name's Rua me Tohamiora, and I study a Bachelor of Arts double major in Māori and Indigenous Studies and Te Reo Māori.
Mauri ora kia tātou katoa, ko Nakira Wipiri tōku ingoa, he uri ahau no Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairoa, me Ngāpuhi hoki, ko te apu o Ngāti Toro. Hello, my name is Nikita Wipiri, and I am in my 4th year of a Bachelor of Law at Te Whare Wānanga o Waikato.
Thank you, well done. Thank you so much. And we just saw the performance that you bring to us, and we really want to know that the meaning of the dance and the chant. And I think that the world may be most impressed by the Maoli haka. And so could you share the meaning of the haka and the traditional chants and dance, Ruameto?
Yes, so I'll start off with the haka. So in traditional times, the haka was used to psych our warriors up before they head out for war. But I think nowadays the meaning or sort of the reasons why it's been performed has changed a little bit. We use them for celebrations like birthdays, weddings, even to commemorate a loved one that's passed away. But I think it's become internationally known because of the All Blacks and when they perform it on the rugby field before a game. And traditionally our songs were laments, sort of some were monotone, some were upbeat, and some were quite slow. But our waiata aringa or our action songs were a bit more of a recent addition to Māori performing arts. And a story that I was told was that that's a result of Tā Apirana Ngata, and he wanted to bring back our taiohi, our youth, back to the Māori culture to immerse themselves in our knowledge and our gifts that we have for Māori performing arts.
Okay, so I see there is a different meaning in different occasion, right? So like which in the different tribe, does they have like different haka?
Yes, yeah. So different tribes will have different styles of haka, and it usually imitates your environment. So for instance, those on the east coast of New Zealand who live in the coastal areas, they tend to have a lower stance, imitating a crab from the shores. Those in more rural areas, inland in the forest, for instance, the people of Tūhoe who live in the forest, they stand up nice and strong, nice and tall, and that's to imitate all the trees and their surroundings and things like that.
Yeah, I can see they always related to the environments, to the land, right? So it seems like a lot of like Māori younger generation, they can do the hakas. So how do you learn traditional like dance and chants and haka? Live or
it's our culture is passed through generations, and usually it's performed a lot on our marae, our traditional meeting houses. We're thankful of national and regional competition and performances. We have one currently happening right now, Te Matatini, and it's thanks to those that, you know, performing arts is quite a common thing now across the country of Aotearoa. So you tend to learn it from a young age at kindergarten, or what we call kohanga reo, through the primary. And then once you, depending on what school you go to, once you get to intermediate, it starts to get quite competitive, and then it just becomes second nature, really.
Okay, so thank you so much. And so let's talk about the program. So Nathan, can you briefly introduce this exchange program? Because you also like collaborate with the Council of Indigenous Peoples in Taiwan and also Donghua University. So can you share with us?
Yeah, so each year the government puts out Prime Minister scholarships to Asia and Latin America, and you can either apply as an individual or for a group. So our team applied for a group scholarship for the University of Waikato. But we wanted to make one that was solely Indigenous focused because it hasn't really been done in the past. So our cohort currently in Taiwan is the first all Māori group that has come over and received one of the scholarships from a university. So in the past, for the last couple of years, we've worked with the Council of Indigenous People on a different project for my other job. So it made sense that when we look to be able to travel again, now that COVID's sort of slowly going away, that we come to Taiwan because we've already got a connection here with Taiwan. And for us as Māori, we've heard stories about how our ancestors come from Taiwan. So for us, we wanted to come over here and explore that even more and just learn as much as we can about Indigenous development. So that's what we've been doing for the last 5 weeks, and we've got one more week left. So yeah, going to do as much as we can while we're here.
So Mihirangi, do you have to share with us?
Yeah, so we have been here for 6 weeks, as Nathan just said. We actually came during the Lunar New Year, so we were staying in Taipei and we got to celebrate the Lunar New Year and learn about some of the cultural traditions and practices with some of our whānau here in Taiwan who work for NZCIO and NZTE from Aotearoa, and that was a really awesome opportunity to just connect and to settle in. We've done so much while we've been here, lots of sightseeing. In our second week we actually went to Keelung and we were greeted by Professor Lynn, who's been an amazing tour guide, and we got to learn about the marine and technology industries, and then we were even lucky enough to go up to Junshi Township in the mountains and hear from the Diane and Thao tribe. which was a super awesome experience. We've had so much Indigenous kai, Indigenous food. We've had plenty of opportunities to be able to cook and harvest and learn about self-sustainability, which has been a really common theme that we've learnt when we've connected with our Indigenous families. And we've made so many awesome connections while we've been here, and I think that's something that really sticks out to all of us, is the people that we've met and the connections that we've made, and yeah.
Yeah, so I see that you are studying in different professional field and area. So how are you selected to come to Taiwan for exchange program?
Yeah, so we put out an application process to all of our Māori students studying at the University of Waikato. Our team at Māori Ki Waikato put them out online, and if you're studying, you could apply for the program. So we received quite a few applications actually, and then what they had to do was submit a video explaining what their reason was for wanting to come to Taiwan. After that, they did a short interview with us because we just wanted to make sure we were bringing the right students for the right reasons, and I think we definitely did that with this group too. So
yeah, the process is very interesting. And during the 6 weeks visit in Taiwan, what impressed you the most? Because you visit the tribes, indigenous tribes in the deep mountains and also by the ocean. So there must be different feeling. So let's start from Mihirangi.
Yeah, for sure. I think something that stuck with me was the fact that Taiwan has been colonized 4 times by the Dutch, the Japanese, the dynasty, and then China. So I think that was a really eye-opening moment for us as a rōpū, as a group. And something that I also found super interesting, which we've actually just presented on, is how the identity piece of how so many Indigenous peoples have lost their identity and are trying to reclaim that right now. And I think it really resonates with me as I'm on that same journey. And so I think it's really special to hear about that, and that was something that was a highlight for me.
Yeah, it's kind of like very fruitful journey. Yeah. So how about Liv?
I think for me, something I wasn't prepared for was the amount of connections that I would make with people here in Taiwan. Prior to coming here, I was really nervous about the language barrier, but what I've learned from being in Taiwan, being immersed with Indigenous people, is that we don't need physical language to connect. We can connect in sharing kai, we connect through song. The connections we've made are lifelong, and that is what I'm truly grateful for from this experience.
Okay, so language is never a problem. So how about you?
Yeah, I think the landmarks in Taiwan have been beautiful, especially up in the mountains. Beautiful views. I think actually seeing the similarities, like Nathan said before, there's a story that we did come from Taiwan, but seeing it, in person, it's like we can sort of compare our beliefs, our culture, our traditional values with the Indigenous people of Taiwan. So that's probably been the main highlight for me so far.
Yeah, thank you. And Nakita?
I think for me, one thing that stuck out to me was a professor that came with us up to the mountains. She had advised there's one thing that you can do is recognise your own power. And by saying that, I think she was meaning towards, I didn't know what I wanted to do as a career. And she was like, what do you think you want to do? And I was like, I don't know, something to do with Indigenous culture. She was like, be what you want to be. I'm studying law. Be a business international lawyer. Then you can create recognition for the cultures and Indigenous people that want to succeed in life. So I think that's something that I took away from this trip, to fully understand my true potential for those that are surrounded, that want to achieve as Indigenous people in this world.
So how about Nathan?
So many highlights. The food, for one, has been amazing.
Yeah, the food.
But just like Liv said, you don't expect to meet so many awesome people, and we've met so many. We've got little brothers and uncles and aunties now that we can come back to, and they've invited us back to their homes, and we've invited them to New Zealand. So yeah, definitely connections that will carry on for years to come.
So which moments that reminded you of your hometown, or is there any similarities in Māori culture?
There are heaps. There's so many. I don't even know where to start. Other people can jump in too, but
Okay.
Just seeing the family dynamics and how they interact with food and getting together over a meal is just so similar to being back home. So the hospitality we've received over here is just like being at home for us.
What about Mihi?
Yeah, I was definitely going to add to that one. Back home, I think we've said a lot when we've been preparing the kai, preparing the food with the Indigenous families. It feels like we're back home in our marae, cooking and cleaning and doing all of that stuff. I think a key, we actually look alike as well, which is so funny.
In the face?
Yeah, we're like, oh my goodness, we are sisters, long lost sisters. And I think that's something that I didn't expect to coming over here, but yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, just adding to the look-alike, especially when we were in Taitung and when we were on La New, you just look around, it looks Polynesians, Māoris everywhere, just shows that we're connected. And I think from the beginning we felt like we were at home here. As soon as we stepped off the plane, you know, going to another country, completely different environment, you'd think to have some sort of culture shock. But for us, we all felt very settled as soon as we got here. So I think that's a real testament to how at home we have been feeling here in Taiwan.
Yeah, I think sort of one thing that reminded me of home was when we went to Lanyu, being sort of like close to the water, reminded me of back home. One of my tribes is a coastal tribe, so going there it was like, wow, this feels like home, like everyone has said. But another similarity with Māori beliefs or way of thinking is actually one of our now uncles, Uncle Shat. He sort of changed his way of harvesting and looking after the land rather than using, like chemicals and stuff that actually damage the land. He's using natural resources to take care of it and still with the same goal to harvest food, grow food and things like that. But he's actually playing a part to looking after our Earth Mother.
Mm-hmm. So I noticed that before you having the meal, you will like a pray or like a blessing in Maori language. So can you like explain or share with us what's it's not like that Christian prayers, right? So everybody share with us about
I think for that aspect we just give thanks to those that also our ancestors and the gods that sacrificed their time and efforts for us to be here today, and for the food that they've presented us with in an offering so that we are able to be safe and nourished by that meal that is presented to us. So we just recognise the sacrifices of our generations that have passed, the gods that have brought us here today, and the food that is here to nourish us.
So during the discussion with the students, with Donghua University students, is there anything you want to share in the process? Because the topic is around the sustainable development goals, right? And anybody can share about this discussion briefly?
Yeah, so I suppose for us coming over here, we wanted to make our what we were learning intentional. So what we did is partnered with the students here at Donghua to focus what we were looking at, and we chose the sustainable development goals because currently with the goals there's no Indigenous influence in the goals or Indigenous goals themselves. So I think for us we wanted to look at it from an Indigenous point of view and combine our knowledge from Taiwan and Māori culture in New Zealand to see what some solutions may be to looking at specific goals. So yeah, our students just presented today and it was great.
Thank you. And what do you think about like the long-term exchanges and the interaction between Taiwan and New Zealand? Because we in the past we already built the bridge, and just trying to try hard to like strengthen the connection.
Yeah, from a university perspective, we hope that we can continue doing more of these for the future. So now that our students have been over here too, we want to push it out to more students to say, apply for these different programs so we can explore the world, become global citizens from an Indigenous point of view, and to find these connections and take up the opportunities as much as we can. But yeah.
Just to add to that, I think what it also creates is recognition for the stance on where our youth is today, opening their minds up to understand that they are actually capable of creating a path for themselves and future generations to come. And from that perspective, I think that creates a longevity of connection between Indigenous people in general, rather than just the connection between Taiwanese and New Zealand. We're the first start to that connection between Indigenous cultures, and then moving forward, hopefully we can all amalgamate to create a unity between us all.
How about Mihi?
Yeah, I think we've just finished doing our presentations about where we were tasked to create some actionable insights based on our learnings, and I think that what we presented, I'm not going to say because it might be something that comes into fruition later, okay. But I think that we have connected so well, we share so many cultural similarities, and I think as a business student, creating these connections and turning them into something that can help everyone here and back home in Aotearoa is something that we're all really passionate about, and so I think building these connections is the first step, and next is making something out of it.
I also believe that the long-term exchange is very necessary and important, and also like the Nakira mentioned about the connection between Indigenous peoples. Yeah, and so let's take a break, and then we will back to the show. Welcome back to Ita See the World, and last section we talk about the origin of the exchange program of Waikato University, and right now we are gonna continue to talk about as a Māori younger generation or a Māori students, and how is Māori knowledge is incorporated in your study. Nakira?
For me, I'm studying law, so it's basically, which I'm lucky to be at the University of Waikato, because they take diversity very seriously with regards to learning both sides of the stories rather than just one. I've been always told my whole life, because I grew up in the Western society, that there was only one path to lead to and one way to go, which is the Western approach of life. As soon as I came into law, it completely flipped me and was just like, there's another side. There's actually the side that your identity is connected to, and that's you being a Māori. And I was like, what does that mean? And so the last 3 years of learning about the law of both sides made me realise that our people were so badly treated in the past, and it made me realise, oh my gosh, I need to help in some way or form to uplift the culture, and that's what law has created for me, and that's what the education system at Te Whare o Waikato has allowed me to do, is to see the truth of the past from both worldviews. So why, actually you just mentioned, but I really want to ask why you choose law as your future study? Oh, well, to be honest, I got a bit lost following the Western goals of life. So I was looking for a career, profit maximising, family. I moved overseas to try and, find my identity in that Western side of life, and it didn't work out for me. I went to Australia and just didn't feel myself and didn't feel like I was getting anywhere in life. So I came home and regrounded myself and thought about, how am I going to help my family? Because obviously that was a principle that was instilled in me by my predecessors or my ancestors that were there before me. So I was like, still on the journey of trying to make that money. So I was like, oh yeah, I'll be a lawyer because it's high profit maximizing, but I didn't realize it was going to open me up to a whole new world of realization of who I truly am.
So how do you learn Māori culture and cultivate Māori perspectives, since you mentioned you were grow up in Western society?
I think I was actually grateful for my parents who made me or reassured me that it was actually an obligation for me to maintain that identity, and they did that through kapahaka. So as Mito had said, it's performing arts, and my parents are very musical, and so were my grandparents and my great-grandparents. So they're like, you're gonna do it. And I was like, oh, okay, because I didn't have a choice. But I was grateful for that, because at the end of the day, I maintained my culture throughout my whole life as a child. Performing on stage was something new for me, but as I grew up, it's natural for me to get up on a stage and sing a song and say a speech in the Western society. So yeah, I think that's why it's important to maintain the culture within your life.
How about Ruameto?
Well, so ever since I can remember, I've been fortunate enough to be quite immersed in the Māori culture. I mean, similar to Nikita with her parents being involved in kapahaka, was the same with mine. And, you know, growing up in my younger baby years, I was going to kapahaka practices every weekend, and there you hear te reo Māori being spoken. Went to a pruna reo, a Māori preschool type thing. Although I went to mainstream elementary schools, intermediate, high schools, I was always in Māori units. And I was actually quite lucky, because all of my Māori teachers in those units have now been recognised as quite well-known Māori language advocates. So I guess I was fortunate enough to be under their guidance, their teachings, and it sort of just stayed with me. I like to immerse myself in Māori kaupapa back home, kapahaka, pōwhiri, and all of these other Māori things. So it's sort of my life, actually, really. I couldn't see myself not being involved in Māori kaupapa. So, you know, I wear my Māori culture on my chest, you know, I'm proud. And things like that. It's everywhere I go, everything I'm in is Māori.
So I have a small questions. Is there any Māori younger generation that doesn't live the way like Māori people?
Yeah, 100%. Me as well. City girls.
City girl?
We grew up, for me, I grew up in Auckland, very far away from my traditional homelands of Taranaki. But just like they said, it all starts with kapahaka. Even though I grew up in Auckland and my mum didn't speak Māori, her mum had Māori bashed out of her, there was still this spark in my mum. And she forced me to do kapahaka. And in the beginning, when I was younger, I felt like it was a hoha, it was taking up time. I didn't really understand the value of what kapahaka would bring to my life, but honestly, kapahaka has brought me here today. If it wasn't for kapahaka, I wouldn't be immersed in my Māori culture, and I definitely wouldn't be here in Taiwan. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of Māori who do not grow up in their tribal homelands, who grow up disconnected. But for us, as the young generation of Māori, we're all about uplifting those Māori, uplifting us to connect everyone to their tribal homes, because being Māori is a superpower, being Indigenous is a superpower, and we just need everyone to realise that.
So if you like see or you know that one Māori younger generation and they're not, they've been saying they're not Māori enough. How do you talk with them, or just want to share more with them to let them know more about the Māori culture?
I think 100%. I think that's how I grew up too. My family was quite disconnected from our Māori culture. We still had our roots where we would go back to spend time with our family, but for me, not many of my cousins or my family speak the language or do kapahaka. So for me, I'm quite late in my journey of reconnecting with my Māori identity, of trying to learn more about what my ancestors did, and picking up our cultural practices again, which is not always easy when some of our whānau, our families, aren't always as supportive because they're on different levels of their journey as well. So I think that's something that the youth are trying to do more, and I think for us in New Zealand, we don't believe in, I suppose, percentages in asking around Māori. So like you said, there's a big thing about young Māori not feeling Māori enough, but we always say that if you're Māori, you're Māori. So I think it's trying to encourage more people to realise that.
So I noticed that people will have a big impression about the moko. Can you tell us the meaning of the moko? Is everybody needs to have a moko, or if you want a moko in your heart, and that would be okay? So anybody can share with us about the moko?
I think it's definitely a symbolic emblem of our ancestors, and it recognises or revitalises the culture to where it stands today. A lot of youth and a lot of people are maintaining the traditional practices at the moment, and moko is one of them, that we're trying to revitalise our identity again. As a young high schooler, I did manu kōrero, and one of my speeches was I wear my tamoko on the inside. And one thing that I remember coming back from that specific thing is that I didn't need to put it out there. I just needed to know inside that I was proud to be Māori, and that was my tamoko, my identity from the inside. And when I'm ready, when it's my time, then I'll get my moko on the outside so that I can, further emphasise my identity to the world.
Yeah. So as we know in Taiwan, Māori education system is always a role model for us. So we really want to know that, because it seems like a lot of Māori teenager, they can speak their own language, Māori language. So we really want to know that. Is there any fundamental, crucial, kohanga reo? So is that makes you can learn a well Māori language?
Yeah. So kohanga reo was an initiative for language revitalisation. So it sort of come at a time where our elders weren't allowed to speak Māori. No one was allowed to speak Māori, but kohanga reo was one of the tools of revitalisation to bring back that language for our Māori people. So it's with the likes of kohanga reo, which is for babies, toddlers, 2 to 4 years old. Following that, it goes into kura kaupapa, which is from sort of primary, elementary school through to intermediate, and then it goes to whare kura, which is sort of like high school. And then, just growing our babies, our kids, with the Māori language, and in those schools itself, they learn about Māori values, Māori traditions, Māori beliefs, and things like that. So it was... I would say that if it wasn't for kohanga reo, then we might not have as many reo speakers. We are sort of at a time now where the first cohort of kohanga reo babies, they're our elders now.
Yeah.
So they're the fruits of kohanga reo and the results of that. So it's a very important aspect to te reo Māori, Māori language, and it's a growing thing, I think, throughout the country.
So how did you guys learn Māori language? From the family, or from school, or from other Leo speakers?
I'll go first. So I'll say went to a puna reo kohanga reo. So this is the first spot. Primary school. Māori language teachers, but also outside of school. Although at school you do talk a lot, you do learn a lot, it's outside, back home, where it really counts. That's where you spend most of your time in your life. So I was fortunate enough to have my father who can speak te reo Māori. My sister went to a full immersion te reo Māori, so was sort of surrounded by Māori Māori speakers and things like that. So that's my journey.
So
Everyone's a little bit
anybody
different.
that can aid
I think
your
for
thoughts?
me, I only had learnt about Te Reo Māori last year, so that's when I started actually learning the language. Prior to that though, it was through traditional practices of the Māori culture that kept me connected to the language, so ceremonies that we would have for visitors, kapaka was another one that kept it alive, and realistically our elders that would go home to go and say hello, like they wouldn't actually acknowledge the culture, but they would growl you in Māori so you knew what they were talking about, or they would you know, laugh with their cousins in Māori and have songs in Māori that you would just connect with because you wanted to connect with them. So that's how I kind of realised, okay, I need to learn the language so I can laugh alongside my cousins in the future and growl the kids when I get to that age as well.
Okay, so how about Liv? You say you mentioned earlier that you're a city girl. So how do you learn? How do you learn Māori language?
For me, yeah, I didn't grow up speaking Māori. Nobody in my whānau, nobody in my family can speak Te Reo Māori. I would say that I'm sort of the first stepping stone in that instance for my family, where I saw the pain that my mum and her family was feeling not being connected in that aspect. And for me, the reo, the language, is the first step, because to feel truly connected to your identity, language is really important because you don't want to be in these spaces where you can't understand what anyone's saying. So for me, I was inspired, you know, I was doing kapake at school, so I decided to take te reo as a language, because in New Zealand in high school it's compulsory to take a foreign language, even though Māori isn't foreign.
Yeah.
It's compulsory to take a foreign language, so I took Māori all throughout my high school years, continued into university, and for me, a turning point was this kaupapa that the bro Meto and I were on, which was Te Ahuritanga, run by Korotu Matua Te Ururoa Flavel. We had this tikanga, this sort of rule in our group, which was whenever we were together, we had to speak as much Māori as we could, which it didn't matter if you couldn't speak at all or if you're fluent. And for me, that was really a turning point, because I had to use the reo rather than just have it in my head, because it's all good and well, you know, writing your essays in Māori, which is what you have to do in the Western education system. But actually speaking, that's what you really need. So yeah, for me, that's it.
Now in Taiwan, whenever like younger generation want to learn indigenous language, we will have a test. We will have a certificates to, so like Māori language, does Māori language have a test or certificates?
I think not sort of like how Taiwanese people do it. I think obviously you'll know who can speak Te Reo Māori, but I think in terms of education, we do have Māori language exams and things like that, and then outside of school, university students can decide if they still want to pursue Māori language at university. And there's also external schools of Māori language, for example, a school of Māori language excellence, which has been put to sleep, was known as Te Panekiretanga o Te Reo, and that was probably the highest level of Te Reo Māori, and thankfully the three teachers, the late Dr. Wharehuia Milroy, Tā Timoti Karetu, and Tā Pau Temara, those three took that school, and thanks to them, about over 15 years of that school, their students, the graduates of that school, are now the leaders of Māori language, and then they've taken those learnings, and because those students come from all around the island, they've taken it back to where they're from to teach other people, and then it's sort of just like a effect, you know, just like that, and it's gone. Everyone has it.
So I think that learning culture, learning language, indigenous language is not that easy for younger generation. But I think that it must like it have more like challenges and some efforts to do. So how does it really feel to be a Maori younger generation in modern society?
Yeah, so I actually think I have a really different journey to a lot of people in this group that we're with. I'm actually the only one that can't speak or understand much Te Reo Māori. I grew up in mainstream education and none of my family can speak Te Reo Māori. I actually did start Te Reo Māori in high school, but then I gave it up because it wasn't something that was acknowledged, or it wasn't something that you should be proud of. And so I'm finally going back on that journey. Te Whare Wānanga o Waikato actually changed my life. The opportunities that I've had, like this opportunity here, where we get to connect with Māori people, has changed my perspective and it's changed how I want to raise my family. And me going on this journey now is exactly what I want and hope to create for the next generation. And yeah, I think being Māori in a young society is a privilege because we are so lucky to be able to be on this journey where it is accepted to reclaim your identity. You've heard stories where some of our elders, they were shunned upon, they were punished and they were discriminated against for speaking Te Reo. And so we are really lucky to be empowered and accepted in today's society. And I think on the other perspective, I'm also really fortunate to be surrounded by such empowering, uplifting people like these guys who are strong advocates for Te Reo Māori. And before coming on this trip, I was so nervous. I didn't actually want to apply because I was super scared that I wasn't Māori enough to be here. But being here the last 6 weeks, they have given me a new kupua te rā every single day, which is a new word of the day, and they are always just so welcoming and inspire me to want to learn more and be proud of what I have and what I am.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note is that being Māori does not look the same for everybody, so it comes in many different forms or colours or levels of journey or confidence, and I think but I think what Mihi said, the cool thing is that, a lot of youth these days are encouraging each other to pick up the reo or reclaim what was once ours, I guess.
So just like Mihi just mentioned that we live in a modern society, but we also have privilege, just like maybe we can use the media, social media to like show up and to like introduce indigenous culture on those platforms. So how do you think, Mihi?
Yeah, I definitely think these guys will attest to the fact that I love social media. And social media has played a big part in my journey and learning and getting exposure into Māori culture again, and wanting to be proud of what I'm promoting and myself as Māori. I think creating equitable outcomes for our Māori people is something that we are all super passionate about, and social media is playing a pivotal role in transforming that change in mindset and perspective and creating these opportunities that Māori may not have known existed. In Māori culture, word of mouth and social media are the biggest forms of promotion, and so it's awesome to see our culture, our traditions, our people, our places being exposed on these large platforms to a global centre.
How about Nikita? Do you want to share with us about this?
No, I think Mihi did a beautiful job at delivering that.
Because as younger generation, I saw a lot of like indigenous influencer, not just in Aotearoa, but also other countries. So I think it's a big privilege to do these things. And so, last question is in which field do you want to develop in the future, whether it's like social media or your professional field, then what ways do you want to contribute to your tribe or Māori society in your own ways?
We have a saying in our office and our team, and it's about global Indigenous domination, because we believe that, there's an uprising at the moment for Indigenous cultures around the world to start reclaiming spaces.
Yeah.
So I think for us, that's what we're wanting to see, especially is around knowing who we are as Māori, so we can go out into the world as global Indigenous citizens to start creating change.
Yeah. Mihi?
Yeah, and obviously my identity journey has played a real pivotal and crucial role in kind of who I am, and so my aspirations are 100% to support people who are on a similar journey, and to create safe spaces where people can be themselves authentically Māori, and unapologetically Māori, and be really awesome.
So how about Liv? What ways do you want to contribute to your tribe or Maori society in your own ways? How you gonna contribute?
Definitely for me, my biggest goal is to move back home and connect to my iwi, to my tribe, to my people, to my rohe, my region, because my whānau has not been there for so long, and I think if I'm that connection. For me, my biggest goal is that the next generation of my mokopuna, my children, they don't have to go through what I went through, what my family went through, which is struggling to connect, struggling to learn the reo. So definitely bringing my family back to our region, back to Taranaki, that's my biggest goal, so that from there we can build our relationship to the iwi and uplift te iwi Māori katoa.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Yeah, for me it's sort of following in the footsteps of my family, sort of in the tourism area, more so travelling the world and showing off the Māori culture, things like that. In Rotorua, where I'm from, we're lucky to have Te Pui o NZ Māori Arts and Crafts Institute, and they've travelled the world to numerous places, and they take what we call a living exhibition with carvings and Māori performing arts. So that's one way I would like to contribute to my tribe and also to the Māori culture.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think for me and the field that I'm going in, I really want to try and inspire my nieces that are currently struggling with finding their way in life at the moment in Māori culture. I think me heading down this road at the moment, it's showing them that it is a capability. They constantly ring me while I'm here like, whoa, auntie, you've been to 7-Eleven. And you know, that's like the biggest things that they're worried about. But I'm like, but why am I here? And that's kind of the message I want to get across to the next generation, is just, you know, accepting the fact that you're Māori and you're succeeding and you are able to inspire. That can just be a domino effect moving forward, and then we hopefully, you know, build a stronger identity together.
Okay, kia ora. So thank you so much. Yeah. And thank you so much for your sharing, because this kind of like perspectives from Māori people is seldom to like speak or show up at the mainstream social media. So thank you so much for giving us such a different perspectives. And I hope you bring back home with all these beautiful memories and hot and spotlights of the journey, and just keep those energy as a Māori younger generation. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. Kia ora. Thank you.